So I assume the people at home can hear me because it was coming out of our speaker. So yeah, and so if you'll back that back up and right there.
Stop it.
So yeah, if you'll stop it here. So what I'm doing first here, the piece that you see there, I think is this one, which I'll show at the end. Um, this is a lidded box, and every bark is different. Obviously, some bark shrinks and expands at a much different rate than the wood, which means as soon as the wood shrinks or expands, the bark just falls off. Some of the bark's really fragile and falls off. Some of the bark you can't take off with a chisel. I mean, so you got to get a feel for that, or you can just look it up. You get a piece of wood, go, hey, what's the bark look like online? So what I'm doing here is before I even started turning it, I just started soaking the edges of the bark and the cambium layer with CA to harden it all. And then every so often as I was turning, if I was worried about the bark, I'd put a little more CA in. I tried not to get as much on the top. I didn't want it to be shiny, but I did want the edges to hold, and I was pretty sure the top would stay. This looks like it's made from two different pieces of wood. It's not, it's one piece. The middle part had a bad spot in it, and I had to cut it out. So if I hadn't taken it 2 inches out, the grain would have lined up perfectly, and it would have been way cooler than it turned out. But it is a box. So I'll pass this around, and then I'll show it at the end. So yeah, if you want to play that, all I'm showing here is the fact that I'm just gluing the daylights out of it. Yep.
Is that Starbond or?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just Starbond CA.
CA though. Yeah.
This is because I needed it to really soak in. Yeah, I've got thin, medium, thick, brown, and black Starbond.
Thin or thinnest?
Yes. Yeah, and it's thinner than water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy thin. But if you really want it to soak in, I mean, thick will soak in for longer, but it won't go into small pores and stuff like the thin will. And the thick takes way longer to harden, which is good. It's, you know, if you want to fill gaps and things like that. But as far as soaking into the wood, it's not so great. If you'll pause it again. So one of the important things to see here, you don't ever want to dig into the bark in the direction of the bark. So if you look, every time I cut, I start outside the bark and cut toward the wood. If you cut the other direction, you're just going to peel the bark right off. I don't care what you do. Or you're going to break chips of it away. You're going to, no matter what. There's one part where it looks like I'm going toward the front, but I'm using the tool as a scraper. So I'm just scraping the edge. And if you're scraping the edge, it doesn't really matter which direction you're going. And it really light scrapes just to make it shiny. But yeah, I'm always pushing in from the end to end. And I did stop a number of times on this one and soaked, just like I said, the kind of cambium layer with CA. All right. Yep. Go ahead and pause it again. So this one is this piece. And what I'm doing here is I used a really sharp skew to start a curve in the very center because I'm going to drill. And when you drill in the bark, the odds of it catching and spinning the bark off are actually pretty good, or cracking the bark, or breaking the bark, or expanding the bark. It's going to ruin the bark. So I wanted to use an ultra sharp tool and cut a spot for the drill bit to go into. So go ahead, and you'll see me do that here. And I also started the drill bit very slow. This is turned up 1,000%. So I started the drill bit very slow until it was through the bark and then went in. I was just showing that. Go ahead and pause it. So on here, obviously everybody knows how to turn round, so I just sped it up. But I drilled the hole and put the screw chuck in. But because the top is so uneven, I couldn't run it up against the chuck like you're supposed to. So I was real careful about using a live center on the other side, because you really need to stabilize it if you're not running against the chuck, because there's nothing holding it from kind of wobbling back and forth. And if I hadn't done that, there's an almost 100% chance it would have wobbled back and forth and maybe even bent my screw chuck.
Get the screw down till it just touched
I just screwed down till the highest point, almost touched, because I knew if it moved at all, it would start breaking the. So yeah, I could have, if I wanted to take a lot more time, I probably could have put in padding and tried to cut a piece that fit into the top of this. But honestly, if you've got a pretty good live center, um, it's pretty safe to do this. Uh, but as soon as you take the live center off, it's going to flop around everywhere. So you really cannot do this without the live center. So I was also a little lazy about the inside of this. It's not, the very bottom isn't sanded quite as perfectly as I'd like, but I will pass this around. This had a couple voids in it. One I left to go all the way through as a hole, and then a couple of the others I filled with copper. So it's got kind of that. And this is called a bird's mouth vase. And I made two. Yes. No, actually, that one is. I don't remember if I think I did that one with Danish oil. I think it's got several coats of Danish oil on it. So it's just the grain is really hard. Yeah, it's where the edge of it is very, very hard in places, and it polishes out really shiny. I could have kept going with more oil and made the whole thing shiny, but um, yeah. So this one is traditionally a bird's mouth vase, um, which this one is as well. And it's obviously it's called that because it comes in and opens up like this. One of the advantages of this, you get way more bark than you would if you just made it straight edged. So if it's an eighth of an inch thick, you'd only have an eighth of an inch of bark. But if you do this number with it, you've now got a spot that's an eighth of an inch thick, but maybe an inch wide if you make it really exaggerated, and you get a whole lot of bark in it. Bird's mouth faces are really nice too because they're really easy. I mean, you always turn them straight in from the bark. It's great if you've got a piece that isn't really wide, but it's long, and you can do them short and fat. You can do them really long and thin. This one's more exaggerated than that one is. This is more traditional. That one's more just a vase with a slight bird's mouth on it.
But
Yeah.
you said you filled something with copper?
Yes.
We,
So it really doesn't look like it should work, but it does. If you take fine copper powder and not the ultra fine, but the mostly fine, and you can't put it in layers of more than about an eighth of an inch thick at a time,
CA,
and drizzle it with really thin CA glue, and you've got to it's got to be thin enough that the CA glue goes all the way through. Once you've got it filled to the top edge and you turn it with sharp tools, it looks exactly like you melted copper and filled it. You cannot tell it's powder. You'll see when it comes around.
Someone told me once when Jim Clues when I had this, or when I took that class with him, fresh CA glue. If it's old CA glue, it doesn't want to soak in. You
Right.
ever put a mound of powder up, flour, and dribble water over it?
Yeah.
And it runs off?
Yeah.
Old CA glue, that's what it does.
Yeah.
You want it to soak in.
Yep. And you want it to be really, you either want it to be wet when you put the next layer of copper on or really dry, not in between. If it's in between, it's still fuming. And what ends up happening is exactly that. You'll put the CA on and it'll just run off because it's still fuming on the inside. So yeah. And just don't rush with it. I mean, if you want it to look really cool and organic, rush with it like crazy and it'll mess it up, but it'll look purposely messed up and you'll have little pinholes in it and you'll have spots that harden before other spots and it'll look like literally like you found a vein of it in the rock. So I've brought in some pieces like that. I mean, you haven't been here for those, but
Use hardener on it after you put the CA on?
no, I will if I've got to build up a number of layers and I don't care what it looks like underneath. There are too many types of wood that between the reaction of the CA, the copper, and the hardener, it'll literally turn white and bubble up all over the place, ruin it. You got to carve it back out and do it again. If there's enough CA soaked in and it's already hardened, then the last few layers won't do that. But you have to be careful with that. And it's a real pain to carve it all back out and put it back in again. So I try to avoid that at all costs. All right. So again, everybody knows how to turn things around. You'll see me kind of taper this off at the bottom, which is where I ended up on the taper with that. Keep in mind when you're turning it this way, again, since I can't mount it in the screw chuck tight, I can never go back to the bottom again. So if I don't finish the bottom 100% here and put my coin in the bottom, then once it's taken off that screw chuck, there's no way to mount it again where it'll be perfectly centered. And so I had to turn, you can pause it there. So the bottom was already shaped here, and I put my tenon in the bottom, and I put my coin in the bottom. I did finish the piece he's holding. I used a narrow belt sander to kind of unsharpen the edge of the tenon, but you can't remount it. I could have used a vacuum chuck with a really narrow, and I've done that before. In fact, with this piece, I had to finish the bottom. Like there was no, so I used a long, thin vacuum chuck and did it. But it's a lot easier if you just finish the bottom 100% before you spin it around. So I spun it around here. You can see it taking shape. I wanted the top to be a little bigger because it was square. I had to carve it down quite a ways, as you can see. And then same thing, you'll see I'll never go toward the bark. I always go from the bark toward the wood every time. And you can see it taking shape. That's the piece he's holding. Yes.
What's this coin?
It's Renaissance Man Scott, and the serial number is from when I started buying the coins, not from when I started turning. But each one's got its own serial number. Each one of these has one of those coins on the bottom. Yeah.
Continue?
Yeah. Yeah, so there I finally got it down to where I was just turning wood, not air. So
This coin's expensive?
define expensive.
What do they cost?
They were, I don't remember. I'd have to look it up. I can tell you right now, they're double what they were when I bought them, and they weren't cheap. I don't know, Brad. If I need something, I buy it. But oh, if you'll pause it there, if you're not going through them like crazy, I bought 500 of them.
Couple $100, $1,000.
It was probably 1,000, but they're more than $1 a piece. Yeah. I bought them from a guy though. His were the least expensive, and he does an amazing job. I also bought a branding iron from him. So one of the most important things about this, it's common sense, but common sense doesn't always occur to you when you're doing it. Let me grab this piece from you, whoever has it.
Not everybody.
Well,
Well.
well, actually, if you'll just hold it up, the thing about a bird's nest is the most narrow part, obviously, is the neck. So you want to take calipers and put it around the neck and find a drill bit significantly smaller than the neck. So if it's going to be a 1/4 inch thick, then you need a drill bit a 1/2 inch smaller than the diameter of the neck. If you don't, you will separate the neck from the bottom, and you will have a napkin ring and a vase. Live edge napkin ring, no less. So that's what I did here. I used a caliper on the outside. I knew about what my thickness was, and so I doubled that, and used a drill bit smaller. So go ahead. And obviously everybody knows how to drill. There's nothing magical about it, but same thing here. I started very slowly into the bark and then sped up once I got inside.
I mean, I thought that was pretty magical. First time I did it.
The first time you do it is, because the whole thought of holding a drill bit still and spinning the wood is a lot of fun. I've got a double extender here. I also have a triple extender for really deep things, but I wanted to be lazy and not turn most of the inside by hand, because reaching inside and starting a hole is very hard. Once I did, then the curve on this is so light, I didn't have to use an inside turning tool, just use a straight, really sturdy tool.
Is that a negative rank scraper?
No, it's just a round carbide tool. Okay, so you can pause it. So the piece that you're about to see there is this one. Yeah, I wanted to bring this as a give back, but she wouldn't let me.
It's a hardship.
So yes, this one is heart shaped, and she's not gonna let me use it as an ashtray either. But
I'm sorry, are you guys married?
yes, this is my wife.
How you asked me about that piece of wood?
Yeah, no, this is my wife.
I feel bad.
I'm gonna say a couple of things about this before I have them start playing the video. Burl, especially big pieces of burl, are very, 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 very dangerous to turn. They're very expensive. This is red Mallee burl from Australia. So this is not cheap. But I have lots of cheap burl at the house that I harvested myself.
So let me tell you, real quick. Symposium, I found a piece of red mallee burl down on the floor for $30.
That's insane.
Yeah.
It was sold.
Oh,
Maybe it was $30,000. He just that's insane because red mallee is very expensive. So this edge that you're seeing here, that's what the entire thing looked like. It's very dangerous. It's like turning a porcupine if each needle was as hard as a rock. It also is very rarely perfectly bowl shaped. So this one actually was heart shaped. I didn't cut this heart out. This is the edge of the burl all the way around. I got lucky there. It also was thicker and thinner in places, so it's very hard to determine where your bowl is going to be. I could have just turned a bowl out of it, but I wanted to really maximize using all of the wood, and I like the heart shape. I also was very careful and used a giant chuck to turn it, because turning this with a small chuck, this was so off center. I have a big lathe. I've got a Powermatic, and at 500 RPM, the Powermatic moved a foot before I got slowed back down again. I had to turn this at 400 RPM, which is very painful. Turning something like this slow because the pit catches every single one of these as it's going around, and you're turning air for 3/4 of the time. Doing that very slowly is very, very painful. Honestly, very painful. It's nerve-wracking, and I can't stress enough, it's very dangerous. So the things I'm going to tell you, make sure you follow them, because if I did something wrong on this, one of my hands would have looked like hamburger when I came in. So I'll pass that around. I could have made this thinner. In fact, and I need to put several more coats of oil on it. It's still kind of dull. And when I do, it should flatten back out a little bit. It's a little bit warped. That's a funny thing about burl too. It warps in lots of different directions. So I made a burl ring and I oiled it, and when it dried, it literally was pretzel shaped. So I mounted it on a ring stretcher and kept oiling it a little at a time and got it back around again. But burl can go in a lot of different directions. I'm sorry? Oh, thanks. Yeah, yeah.
To see that. That's very, very good.
Thanks. I'm sorry?
Pieces that size rare.
Yes. Yeah, I've had this one for about 6 years. I wanted it to be 100% dry before I turn it. Still wasn't. It was 99% dry. I mean, it was very close to 100%.
whoa, 300 pounds.
Tractor pulled it out of the woods and the rear end was barely touching the ground. I mean, it was huge cherry.
I always drive around with a chainsaw after every storm. And I came across this guy who had a house, a tree fell, it had about 30 burls on it. And I asked if I could cut it up for him and take it away. And he said, no, I told the city to come take it. And I said, well, yeah, but the city doesn't want it. They're doing you a favor. And he goes, no, I think the city wants it. He wouldn't even let me cut the burls off. He's like, no, I already told the city they could have it. I'm like, they're going to use it as mulch. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. This piece came out of the cemetery next to my house.
Bunch of tornadoes.
It was just a wart-shaped burl sticking out the side. In fact, you guys can pass it around. There's some people who haven't seen it here.
That's mine.
Yes, all the pieces pretty much up here are hers. Some of them I made for other people, and she cleaned them anyway. So yeah. So go ahead and hit it.
Whatever he's.
So you can see how off center this is, and a huge amount of the weight was all on one side. So, and I'm turning air. If you look at the tool, I'm pushing down on the lathe. If you push in toward the wood, it's going to hit every time that wing comes around, and you're either going to break your tool or your hand, or you're just going to end up with a wildly uneven cut. So what you're doing is, if anybody's ever seen a metal lathe work, you're imitating a metal lathe. You hold the tool as tight down as you can, barely touch it, and just move across so that every time it comes around, it catches the tool a tiny bit. And you have to take off very small amounts at a time. You can see here, you're starting to see the center. the edge on the center, but it's still tilted. So I'm turning, that's the other problem too. On the flat part, if it's angled, which this was angled slightly, it's actually wedge shaped. So you're cutting and then it goes around. Now you're cutting air, and the part that comes back up is a ramp. So it just wants to push your tool out. So you really have to hold the angle very perfect and hold it very tightly and not push in. If you push in, it's just going to keep the ramp. You'll just end up with a smoother shaped ramp, which you don't want. So it takes a long time. You can go ahead and pause it. I don't know if you can back it up enough to where it's stopped or not. Because okay. Yeah, right there. So this required a lot of planning because I wanted to get the bowl part of it as close to the center of the heart as I could. I couldn't get it dead centered because the hills in it were too uneven. And there's a big chunk all the way off to one side that you can see here. I also needed to plan ahead for the thickness of the tenon on the bottom, the thickness of the platter around it, and not go. I could have technically gone into the platter a little bit with the bowl, but I didn't want to go all the way into my coin on the bottom. So and then it's really hard to make a measurement on the outside because it's wildly unevenly shaped. So you can take a big set of calipers and measure it, which I did. And then I drilled a decently sized hole in the middle, enough to give me a good start to carve out the bottom or the middle. So I measured that hole very, very carefully and made sure that I only reached the bottom of it. I didn't want to go any deeper into it because I wanted the bowl to look like it was organically coming out of a platter, and I didn't want the bottom of the bowl to be deeper than the platter. It needs, for what I was shooting for, I wanted it to look like it was sitting on the platter. Then turning the top flat, I didn't bother showing that because it takes, again, forever. I mean, it's so rough that you're just grinding away and grinding. You're cutting all the tips of those things off, and then you're cutting all the bases of them off, and then you're getting in the next layer of the curve, cutting the tips off on the bases. Just getting that flat on the top took forever. And then once I got there, I used a parting tool about the thickness of the platter, a little bit more so I could sand it down and stuff. A parting tool to go straight into the side of the edge, which was, again, very hard because it's mostly air and the parting tool wants to catch it and it wants to follow all those little bumps back and forth. So I gave myself a little extra thickness so that I'd be able to carve a lot of that away. So I started there, and then you'll see in just a minute here in the video, I also used the parting tool to define the outer edge of the bowl because it's when it's turning, since it's all rough and bumpy, there actually is no way to see where the round part is that you wanted to carve out. So I held the parting tool about where I wanted the outside edge, and I wanted that bowl to have some live edge as well. So there's a lot of planning that actually goes into doing something like this, and this is the extreme end of kind of live edge turning. So go ahead. So right there, you can see the line that I'm gonna have to fire my my AV guy. It's the size that you see on the bottom. That's almost all the way closed. 200 millimeter. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's big. Yeah, I think it's 200 millimeter. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so right now all I'm doing is going back and forth and trying to knock off all the tops and get it down to the point I actually have something round. Once you've got it round, then you can actually carve. But man, it took me forever to reach that point. And again, I'm doing all this at 400 RPM. So you're just moving very, very slowly. The video is sped up 1,000%.
How long have you worked on that?
I did about 90% of this in a day. Grinding away all this outside stuff is what took forever. Once I got it, the point it was round, then the carving was easy. Yeah, you can hit play. Everybody knows what the actual turning's like. But see, I'm actually, that was the other reason I made that groove. I made the groove with the parting tool so I'd have something to catch my gouge with, because otherwise I'd just be trying to fight all of those bumps. So I made a groove and I had something to start my gouge with, and then I was able to, now it's just like turning a bowl. And again, until you're turning in that base, it's mostly empty air. So you're holding the tool very carefully, very, very solidly, and just coming across. And at 400 RPMs, it's like chunk, 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 chunk. I mean,
How's the shoulder?
it was,
That reminded me.
yeah, well, I was holding it down really hard. So that's, yeah, if I'd been following it, it's rough on the shoulder. So yeah, so you can see, all I'm doing is turning it. It's slow because it's turning slow, and it's slow because if you move the tool away without thinking and you catch one of those little pieces, you rip a chunk out, and now you've got to somehow deal with that. Go ahead and pause it there. The most important thing, and I can't stress this enough, if you're turning air or anything this rough, set your tool rest, and ideally a longer one than you need. I don't care whether you're turning back here or not, and never move your arm to the side of the tool rest. Because that, when it was spinning, especially once I turned off enough, I was able to speed it up to about 600 RPMs. It only looks like it's maybe 4 inches smaller than it is. If your hand gets in that, it probably won't cut off your hand, but you might wish it had. It would really, really mangle your hand. So
You would have lost bone.
yeah. Oh yeah. No, you'd lose bone. It would break. It would be bad. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like a saw blade made out of wood. It would be bad. So I literally will lean on the inside of the tool rest, hold it down, and just make every possible effort never to come around the side of the tool rest. Because if you do, it is a lesson you'll probably only have to learn once. Once you lose a hand, you don't need it anymore. So yes. And I've got the removable stop switch, so you can stop it over here without coming around the side of the lathe. Now if you've got the tool rest sticking out past the end of the longest point, then you know you can reach around there. But even then, I had a very large, very solid chuck. If this had been a smaller chuck, if a piece comes off, it's also going to do a lot of damage to you.
Or Jimmy Clue, they they had something like that along tool rest, and they either put a piece of tape out there that would, hit their arm, or I think one guy had a little magnet with a little, I called it like a bicycle flag, but it was about that tall, so he knew if he hit it, he better not go any farther.
Like I said, I actually will lay my arm along the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll actually lay my arm along the rest so that if I'm pulling away from the rest, I know I'm not touching the rest anymore. But I can't stress enough. You cannot go past the rest with any part of your body that you want to keep.
When you put your tool into the wood, it starts bouncing. You think you gotta press harder.
Right.
That's the worst thing you can do. It's gonna bounce even more. You need to back off and put light pressure. You don't want pressure. You want
Right.
cutting it.
Well, and that's for the people at home. He said it's extremely important, and I kind of touched on this a minute ago, that you don't want to push into the wood because you feel like, oh, I need to take away more material, push in harder. The harder you push into the wood, the more it pushes back and forth. It'll cut ramps in your wood, and it'll keep them no matter how small you get it. You'll just keep cutting until you run out of wood. You can push down very hard, but the tip of your tool needs to not move any farther into the wood. So you start and you're taking a very small amount of wood off, push down hard, and I actually grab the tool all the way around and put my hand against the tool rest so that if I'm cutting in, let's say, a 1/16 of an inch, I can't go farther than a 1/16 of an inch in because my tool is against the rest. And correct. So I stop right there and I go across. Sometimes actually I'll even start by holding it in place with the lathe off, turning it, seeing where it's going to touch the tool. And then I'll hold on to it, back it off, start the lathe, and then work my way slowly into it and go across. You're really acting like a hand-powered metal lathe at this point because you're just shaving off and shaving off and shaving off until you get down pretty solid. And you can't follow everybody says, oh, you need to follow the bevel. Well, there's nothing to ride the bevel on. If you could spin it fast, you can. If I could spin this at 1,500 RPMs, I could ride the bevel, but can't spin it at over 400 RPM. So yeah, you hold the tool down hard and you just bite the bullet. Know it's going to take a very long time to get it down flat. Right. There's nothing to ride the bevel on. When it's going that slow, you're riding the bevel on air. You'll mess up the tool, you'll mess up your hand, you'll mess up the wood. So yeah, these are a pain.
Not pushing into the wood.
Yeah.
If you're turning a piece that has a lot of air, if you're turning a lot of air, you do not want to push it in.
Correct.
Because if you push and then that gap hits up, you'll slide in.
Yep.
And either you catch the tool and it ends up in your face or in the ceiling, or you break everything apart and it ends up in the face of your ceiling.
Or you knock it off the chuck and it goes flying across the room. And this would be like a buzzsaw running through your shop. I mean, I would not want to see what happens. So this next part, I probably should label not safe for work, but this is the part everybody wants to see. So yeah, you can hit play. So yeah, this is the favorite part, that this is the reason that you do it right here.
Get started.
Yeah, I actually I did the bottom of tung oil, the first layer with Danish oil, and then in about 7 days, I'm going to switch back to tung oil and finish it with tung oil because I want a little shinier finish on this one. But the Danish oil is really good for it's way faster polymerization than the tung oil. So I wanted to at least get it to where I could bring it in here and have everybody see the grain. It's a little dull now, as you can see. When it's shiny, the grain on this is ridiculous.
I just started burning and had a burl given to me when I first started. And the biggest mistake I made was I used super glue to hold bark down in, be careful. And then I used activator.
Yep.
And you could sit there with a dental pick and just pick that white out.
That white stuff,
I am
it's a
so-
mess.
It's almost like I'm tempted to put it back on the lathe and it's
Turn it back off.
gonna be, all over.
Yeah,
Something like that with my platter, right?
yeah, yeah.
Then you made it was a bowl and turned it into a platter.
Yeah, but that wasn't because of the CA actually bubbles up white, looks like flour. It's nasty.
You can't get this like that.
No, it was thinner on the inside than I thought it was. So this last piece is the piece that I'm doing for the Share the Wealth. So that's where you're seeing me turn here. This piece, I used a technique that is incredibly easy. You cannot do it with every type of wood. I actually meant to bring in a piece I did with birch where I left the outside ring on too. That one you have to use a lot of super glue because birch shrinks and the bark doesn't, and it just falls off. So I meant to bring that in and forgot. So with this wood, I don't actually know what it was, but the bark is really thick, really chunky, and comes apart really painfully easily. So what I did is I turned the outside, got the bark about as round as I wanted, and then just peeled it off. Turned the whole piece, glued the bark right back on, and finished it. So the bark was only on this for like 2 minutes of the entire project. And all of a sudden you take away all of your risk, all of your, made it real easy. So I'll pass that around. It's cheating, but it still feels good. Yeah, it's just a trick. And you just have to make sure, because obviously it's not flat on top. It's curved where the bark was. So you just match that curve, glued it right back on, and there was no risk whatsoever of damaging the bark the whole time I was turning this, except right at the beginning when I was making the bark round. And you can tell I'd cut this piece kind of rectangular, so it was a real pain to get it round, but go ahead.
That's scrap pieces of that wood with the bark. Cut that bark off. Because if a piece flies out, you ain't gonna find it, but you'll have a piece.
Right.
Oh, okay.
That's
Gotcha.
good too.
Yep. So again, everybody knows how to turn stuff around, but on this, I was doing another bird's mouth. It's a little more exaggerated. This is more traditional. So we're shorter, fatter, less of a vase than the other. Yeah, he's feeling the inside. I did this quick and easy just for the demo, so it's not very perfect on the inside, but hopefully most people who see it on your shelf are not going to pick it up and rub the inside. Just wood turners. Yeah. No genies coming out of this.
Last piece you had in that video was that, did you change centers on
Change centers?
offset?
Oh, no, it was just rectangle. So I had to turn it round. But yeah, I did not. But I did the same thing with that piece that I did with the other one. Drilled a hole in the center, drilled the hole first, and then took the bark off, which left me a hole to line it up on. I mean, the outside did too, but I wanted to get it real close. Turned the hole, used a a bit. You can go ahead and let it play to the end.
Get back, top rectangle.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a rectangle there. So I used a very sharp, small skew here to cut through the bark and get a nice round.
Can you back up to that skew? Just back up just a little bit. Well, a
That's
friend
not
of mine, I don't know, did you make that one? Or-
No,
You can get this, high-speed steel, 1/4 inch round
bar stock.
bar stock, I mean, for like $6 for 3 foot of it.
Yeah.
All right, cut it down, put an edge on it, put a handle on it, you got a tool. And I have used a lot of those, make little tips, make anything, but that right there you can make.
Yeah, I've got 3 different tools made out of this size bar stock, and they all work well. I'm sorry?
Class. Homemade tool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another good.
That is-
Actually, I should have pointed it out. When I was doing the big piece, I was using a scraper to make the bottom as flat as I could and get it close. That is it's just a metal file that Stan put an edge on and gave me. In fact, you can still use it as a file. It's still rough all the way across. The only place it's smooth is the front edge. And it doesn't hold the edge real long, but if I want to do something that's pretty rough, it's not real heavy. I've got a much heavier one. The important thing about it is if I totally ruin it, it was probably worth $1.
Yeah, there-
I mean, I can buy another one from a pawn shop and make it. So,
demo.
and I did
Everybody's got.
one edge of it sharp corner and the other edge round. So I can go this way to kind of curve into and to do inside curves and stuff, and the other way to kind of plane it. And I use that a lot on this piece. The other thing I will say about the big piece, the wings on it were so big, I sanded the inside till I'd reach where it started being a wing, and then used a orbital sander to do the rest. And I know it's cheating, but it beats the daylights out of hand sanding all that. And that stuff's hard.
Yeah,
Just because a lot of people feel like, oh, you should do the whole thing on the lathe. I'm like, yeah, exactly. I'm using my tools. And people say, oh, the old craftsmen didn't do it. I'm like, I guarantee you, they would have.
The old craftsmen didn't have sandpaper.
Correct.
They had his papers.
If they did, they would use it.
Yeah, I bet you money 200 years ago, if you'd given somebody a DeWalt orbital sander, they would have gone, this is the best thing in the world. Yeah,
Plugging it in.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they had sticks they would sprinkle sand on and rub too, which is not pleasant. You can just let it finish. The other thing you have to be careful with, I'm doing the super glue around the edge there. Unless you're going to finish the whole thing in super glue, don't get it anywhere other than the bark and cambium layer, because everywhere you get it, oil's not going to soak in. You're going to have this strip that's bad. So I actually glued this before I even turned it round. So any super glue I got on it, I was turning it off. If you do get a little super glue, you can plane it back off, but thin super glue soaks in a long ways. You can go back to spotlighting me, and I'll hold up the pieces that, let me collect everything so I can show it to the people at home.
We have to give it back.
Well, somebody's gonna keep this one. Yeah, my wife does too. That was originally supposed to be the one I was giving away, but she nixed that idea.
You know where there's a wood. Exactly where it was. Or is that- we get the, oh, man, pick it up.
How do you get what? Wait. We have a question, but I can't hear him.
I know an area up in Western New York where it seems like it's a virus going through the tree, where the burls all over the place. Is that typical? Does it run in?
It's not usually a disease. Normally the burl is caused because a branch breaks off and it's like a callus. The tree just starts growing layers over to cover up where the damage was. Sometimes it's a lightning strike. Sometimes it can be sickness, but normally sickness kind of affects the whole tree evenly. Where burls, and that's actually a problem with burls too, because if it was a broken off branch inside, there may be really big hollow gaps and stuff inside. So sometimes you get the inside, instead of being beautiful. Right. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes people don't want you to do it, but if you go out and cut the burl off with a chainsaw pretty carefully and then coat it with, they actually make a mastic that's made to save trees, coat it with that it'll start healing over normally without the burl, and you get to keep the burl. But you do have to convince the person with the tree that, and it's very easy to get infected, the tree to get infected. So you have to keep it pretty clean, keep your tools pretty clean, and don't kill the person's tree just to get a burl. There is a tree near me that's got a burl like this big on it, but it would, yeah, we're waiting for a hurricane to take out the tree so I can go back and get the burl. It's,
area, and you find ones that have pearls on it. If you take like a little hacksaw blade and slice the burl, and then take that wood or shave it over to somewhere else on the tree, or even another tree, and slice it, it will grow better. Bottle brush would do that. I don't know if every tree does that.
so I'm just going to show the people at home some of the things I was passing around. This was the piece that Stan made, and you can see this is where the V of the tree was. It was kind of like this, and the V came down one side and came up the other. So he made a bowl literally twice as big as the tree by just using that crotch and cutting away almost nothing from the widest parts of it. And that's maple. This one's cedar. This is one I did. I just left a tiny bit of the bark. Sometimes it just makes a really nice accent on a piece. I've turned a bunch of ashtrays where I just left a little bit of bark in one spot just to make it look a little less plain. And of course, this one had lots of holes in it that are technically live edges. Yeah.
You're coming really slow.
Yeah, it's actually good on I think the people at home. It's this setup is not the greatest. This was the other one I said I made out of the burl that looked like a wart. I mean, it's technically a mess, but it's kind of an emerging vase, which I really like.
My bread.
No, what kind
I
of?
think
Oh,
it's
sorry.
camphor, but I can't remember for sure.
Camphor? Oak branch? Camphor?
Yes, this is camphor. That's why I'm epoxying it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be epoxy. Yeah, so this is definitely camphor. You can still smell it. So this is the piece I was saying I wanted to maximize the size of the inside of the bowl. So I left the outside thick enough and didn't turn this away. And that gave me a little bit interesting bowl. It is not finished, obviously, from here down. The inside is finished, and I'm gonna remount it on the lathe the other way so I can finish all this. I haven't put the coin in the bottom of it yet.
I need 2 more.
And she says she needs 2 more, so I may not give that one to her either. So that way I don't have to make the other 2. This is the first bird's mouth that was turning in the video. It's kind of elongated compared to a normal bird's mouth vase, but I want it to be more vase-like. And so, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it at home, but there is copper right there. You can see it's shiny, and it looks just like it was poured in. You'd never guess it was actually made with powder. But so yeah, that's that piece. And you can tell for the people who don't turn very often, you can see maybe not enough light. This is a branch that goes all the way through. So the log was actually shaped this way, and this was the bark on the outer part. So you can see the curve here. So the log went right through here, and this curves down and this curves down because that's actually the curve of the log. So the log was, I used about 80% of the log. So I just cut the bark off the bottom here. So if you picture the log going right about here. So I used about 80% of the width of the log. Whereas this one, I only used about half of it. So you can see I was just getting into the center a little bit. I used less than half of it. I'm using my mic.
Yeah, we don't want to turn our speaker on.
No. Yeah, it'll feed back.
Can't hear any.
No, that's because I have mine muted. So we don't hear me coming through mine. It's asking me to turn up my own volume because it wants me to hear myself. But yeah, ignore that. So yeah, another bird's mouth. This is more traditional shaped. And I used a little less than half the log in that, but same thing here. The log was kind of, the center was here. So I cut away even a lot of the center.
Dumb question, or
Yes.
Number 38.
Call that bird's mouth because it does this.
Yeah, because it looks like a bird's mouth from profile.
505.
And the advantage of the bird's mouth, like I said, is if you've got a 1/4 inch this way and it's shaped like this, then all of a sudden that 1/4 inch can give you a 1/2 inch or an inch of bark. Where if I made it straight up and it was a 1/4 of an inch, I'd only have a 1/4 inch of bark or an 1/8 of an inch of bark. So bird's mouths are meant to have a lot of bark and display a lot of bark. Same thing if you're turning a bowl. If you're turning a bowl with a big log, if you make the bowl kind of dish-shaped lip, you can end up with a large, even if it's only an 1/8 of an inch thick bowl, you can have a large chunk of actual bark in it. Where if you make the bowl edges come straight up to the bark, you have a very thin layer of bark, which is also a look. I didn't do anything that was like that, but a lot of people like the look of just this really ultra thin layer of bark. Very hard to keep it on. It all wants to just chip away because it's very thin. So this was the box that I made. And on this one, I just literally left the top as solid bark.
Actually looks like burning cigar. Really big.
It does. And like I was saying, for the people who could see it in here, it looks 2 different colors. It actually is one single piece, but there was a bad spot in the middle. I had to cut out a couple inches of it. So you're actually seeing, you're missing the parts that would have made this look like one piece, unfortunately. I was very disappointed, but it fits nice and tight. And then the last piece, which you saw in the video but didn't see live, is this one. It's heart-shaped and it's a bowl emerging from a platter, which is you can see all the edges of the very, very, very dangerous burl.
It's gonna make a great charcuterie board.
Ashtray, you said?
Well.
So yeah, I still have a couple more coats of oil on it, so it's kind of dull at the moment, but at least you can see the grain and everything, and that's the bottom of it. So I used a very, very large chuck. I wanted to hold on to it as tightly as I could without breaking it. And the more surface area you have on the chuck, the bigger you can turn without it wanting to break off the lathe. And I didn't have a very thick edge, so I didn't have to grab a lot. I didn't want to waste much of the burl either. If I'd put a really thick edge on it, then this base would have had to been thinner and the bowl would have had to been smaller. So, but I do have a vaguely heart-shaped emerging bowl. So,
Mm. Pretty incredible.
all right. So that's it, which is good since it says my internet connection's unstable.
And it stayed after you got all done. It did not warp. It did not. It's because this is that's a big collar.
Yeah,
If you,
yeah,
well, a little bit maybe there, but that's the table.
that's the table. No, it's, yeah,
That is very good.
he was saying that it stayed flat, which on the bigger a platter it is, the harder it is to make it stay flat. So there were 2 things about it. One is I let it sit for about 5 years or 6 years before I turned it.
Mhm.
The other, but the other thing that's very, very important is I oiled both sides of it very quickly. You oil one side, it now expands and you have a nice big curve, and you go to oil the other side, maybe it'll come back to where it was. I oiled the bottom and immediately oiled the top, and oiled the bottom and immediately oiled the top. You want it to soak in exactly evenly and stay as flat as you can, because something that's big. Now, what you can do on a lot of platters, and I did for a platter that I made for Elvira, you can remount it after it's fully cured and then sand the bottom edge. I like to leave a little edge on the bottom right here. And so if I do that, I can remount it and sand that so it's perfectly flat again, or use a scraper. This piece would be astronomically difficult to remount. I do have a vacuum chuck that would do it, but it would be scary. So I really, really wanted that to come out as flat as I could right off the bat. So. Correct. And he's right. The longer you let it dry, the harder it gets and the less fun it is to turn, the harder it is to turn. Turning wet wood can be a lot of fun, but it warps a lot. Turning dry wood is, especially burls are very hard and there's no way to follow grain because it goes everywhere.
Nice. This thing got dry after about a year or so. It was like concrete. I had a
rough everything out with carb on it, and not do it. Then I had to finish it up.
Well, yeah, this was like turning concrete, and I had to sharpen the tools about every 5 minutes. I bet I sharpened my gouges 10 or 15 times while turning this. I mean, the constant strikes of it and the hardwood and that, yeah, it's,
More difficult than to turn my bowl.
that is your bowl.
Well, another one, the first one, the burrow. We have it in the living room. Thick one.
This was way more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was turning a lot more air. That one, once I got started, yeah, it was hard, but I was able to ride the bevel and just carve out chunks. This was holding the tool and just knocking off little pieces as it's coming around, and very, 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 and I could only turn 400 RPMs. Your bowl in there, I was able to turn fast and really carve away at it. So yeah, this is very difficult. So does anybody have any questions?